It's a culty day, my favorite kind. And today especially, we're talking to one of the most brilliant voices in cultiness, Amanda Montell. So if you ever find yourself suspicious of a certain group or feeling unusually drawn into a way of thinking and wondering, am I getting sucked into a cult? You're going to love this episode. And what I love about Amanda is she has a delightfully fun way of talking about the everyday cults we might find ourselves in. I discovered her 4 years ago when her podcast Sounds Like a Cult blew up out of nowhere. She's a total intellectual academic and also one of the most funny, clever, bright, and sharp people, as you will see. And honestly, her perspective has gained her own cult following and is one of the more distinctive voices on the topic. Amanda Montell is a linguist, a New York Times bestselling author, and the co-host of two wildly popular podcasts, Sounds Like a Cult and Magical Overthinkers. Her books, Word Slut, Cultish, and The Age of Magical Overthinking have changed how a lot of us think about language, power, influence, and the stories we tell ourselves. It's so juicy. In this conversation, we talk about why cults are so fascinating and how language shapes beliefs and why leaving certain systems is really hard, and how cognitive biases sneak into everything from politics to wellness to relationships, even a cult of one. And also, I catch myself again and again in some really unhelpful thought spirals that I correct in real time in this episode. I'm a little embarrassed by it, but I figured I would keep it in because we all are guilty. And, we're going to have some fun with it because Amanda is hilarious and so fun. Now, think of some people you know that love a good cult documentary or true crime or just shit talking, and send this to them right away, okay? Let's get into my chat with Amanda Montell. We are here with Amanda Montell, and I was telling her, I hope I don't stand out because I remember when you started in your bedroom. So I'm a podcast strategist, and so everybody wants and dreams of their podcast, taking off, and then the Rogan money just magically comes and, natural, right? And so, but your show was one of them that, started in the bedroom, right?
Yeah.
Of South Cult.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not rocking Rogan money. Let me put that out there. I wish. No, and I also, I never dreamt or anticipated that it would find a listenership. I kind of started it as a pandemic project that was meant to get the word out about my book Cultish to a broader audience. And I thought, sort of true crime comedy podcasts seem to be working. I wonder if that sort of lighthearted treatment would work for cults, which is, a delicate line to walk because you want to be reverent and respectful of people's traumatic experiences. But at the same time, my aim is to make, delicate and heavy subject matter accessible and relatable to general audiences. And it's a constant learning curve of figuring out how to toe that line. But I thought I would maybe do it for a year at most. And it's just been, it's been quite the ride in podcasting. And I was just re-listening to some early episodes and wondering if they sounded similar to the episodes that we've released more recently, because I've been doing it for 4 years now. And I was like, wow, this show has really just kind of been the same thing for 4 years, in terms of the tone and the and the thesis, I guess. And I don't know if I had to think about why the show has continued finding a listenership. I think it's just I have this really consistent love for this subject matter, and I'm glad to still be able to talk about it.
Yes. Well, would you mind introducing yourself and your work
Sure.
for those who may not know? Yes.
Yes, sorry, we jumped into it. So,
No,
in media
I want
res, as they
yeah.
say. Yes, I'm Amanda Montell, and I'm a writer and podcaster. Thus far, I've written sort of research-based social science-y books for general readers. My background is in linguistics, and so my first book is called Word Slut, and it is sort of a quick and dirty crash course in feminist sociolinguistics, or the relationship between gender and language and how that shows up in everyday life. And then my second book is called Cultish, which is about the language of cults from Scientology to SoulCycle. And my third book, which just came out in paperback, is called The Age of Magical Overthinking. And it's about cognitive biases in the information age, or sort of modern day irrationality. And then I also have these two podcasts that correspond with my second and third books, called Sounds Like a Cult and Magical Overthinkers.
It's so good. What I especially appreciate about your voice, you are so fun and funny, and
Thank you.
you have a very distinctive voice that is like a lighthearted treatment. I never heard it put that way, but that's exactly right. Like a lighthearted treatment of things that have some much deeper roots. And so, one of the questions that you always ask at the beginning of Magical Overthinkers is, what is something that is living rent, or what are thought spirals that are living rent free in your mind this week? And what is that for you?
Oh my god, you're flipping it around on me. I know, I always kind of, like, uh, accost my guests with that question, whether they anticipate it or not. I mean, at this point, I ask it at the beginning of every episode, so if you've heard the show, that you know it's coming, but, I didn't know it was coming today. Oh my goodness. Well, okay, this is what comes to mind. Yesterday, I went with a friend to see Kristen Stewart's directorial cinematic debut, The Chronology of
Oh my
Water.
goodness.
It's her first time directing a movie, and I know that she's been, interested in adapting this particular, like, very, very dark memoir for a long time, written by Lydia Yuknavitch, and it's about, like, her the whole life, starting with her childhood in the Pacific Northwest, in a household where she had, like, a very abusive father, and she was also, like, a champion swimmer, and then grew to be, like, this celebrated writer who was championed by these amazing mentors. But anyway, she had just, like, a really, really traumatic life. And I won't lie, my friend and I microdosed on some psilocybin before we went to see the movie, because we heard it was, like, kind of like, visually experimental, or just, like, the format was experimental, and so we were like, "Oh, maybe this will, like, heighten the experience." I love mushrooms, and I, like, have done them a lot, so I'm down to, like, go into an experience kinda
Yeah.
blind on them, which is not something I would endorse for everyone. But anyway, I, uh I had no idea just how dark the approach to this material, which is already dark, was gonna be. But, like, whoa, this movie was emo, and it just made me think a lot about my own relationship to, like, the traumatized people in my past. And, like, I don't know if this is irrational, but, like, oh my god, this is like such a vulnerable share right now. But, like, I started to realize that, like, sometimes in my relationship with my partner, who I've known since I was 12 years old, like, we just got married and we've known each other since childhood. Anyway, um
Congratulations.
oh, thank you. We have not been together since childhood. We reconnected as adults, whatever.
Yeah.
He is, like, an incredibly sweet, like, emotionally healthy person. Can you imagine? And I, like, whenever I'm upset, he is just, like, really nurturing, and really, he carves out a lot of space for me to express that, and he's, like, so doting. And sometimes I, like, over dramatize how upset I am at, like, certain little things, because because I know that he's gonna, like, comfort me so much. And I was thinking, like, part of the reason why I probably over dramatize um how upset I am at like something really small, like, I don't know, some comment he made or like something that's really not worth getting upset about, is because in my past relationship, which I would count as kind of traumatizing, there was like absolutely no room for me to like express any type of like emotional negativity. Sorry, this is so intense, but like as I was like on mushrooms watching this movie about trauma, I was like, "Oh my god, that's why I'm such a drama queen in my current relationship
Oh
because
my
I'm finally
God.
able to like have like negative emotions
Freedom.
and have yes, like emotional
Yeah.
freedom and have those be met with like nurturing." So anyways, that's something that I was thinking about.
I love that you shared
So
that, and I as
intense.
somebody that is kind of a drama queen and has, like, a stable husband that's freaking awesome and kicks ass, I relate to it as well,
Okay, thank you for saying that. Yeah.
but I think also just by nature, everything you're doing is, like, cultiness, linguistics, overthinking. I mean, all of this are I think what I appreciate about your work is that you almost give permission to the shit we don't think about, like, but we're like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like I was thinking
Yeah.
about, I love, I think cult stuff is so unbelievably fascinating. Like I cannot get enough of cult stuff. And I was talking to our friend Sarah Edmondson this past week, and I'm like, I've watched Nexium from every single angle. Like I was really into the Ruby Franke story about the Mormon, mommy vlogger that ended up being a total child abuser, and
Yeah.
her co-conspirator Jody Hildebrand, where I was like really captivated. Like talk about thought spirals on it. And then, there's a new Netflix documentary called The Jody Hildebrand Story about I forget what it's called. But I'm like, my husband came in and he's like, "Are you learning anything different?" I was like, "Not really, but I can't get enough." Like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, why are we so captivated by this culty stuff?
That's a great question, and it was one of the questions that I really wanted to reckon with when writing my book, Cultish. And what I came to is that it's a case of rubbernecking. Like when we can't stop looking at a car crash, we're trying to determine whether or not the thing on screen is a direct threat to us. And I think one of the reasons why we can't stop looking away, even though the you know, the format of most of these cult documentaries is really, really similar. The tone is similar, the music is similar, it's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it in terms of like the cinematic experience for a viewer. But on top of that, I think one of the reasons why we don't get sick of them is because we're trying to figure out whether or not we would have made the same choices as the people on screen. And a bone I have to pick with a lot of the treatment of these cult documentaries is that, they sort of make it seem like there was some kind of like fatal irrationality or fatal bad decision or flaw, um, or just like, I don't know, um, kind of like background quirk in the person on screen that made them materially different than us, like whether it's the cult leader figure or the followers. And thus, once we're hooked into the story, we can then feel kind of superior to those kind of like brainwashed, hoodwinked fools who fell for this thing that we would never fall for. But one of the reasons why I do take a more lighthearted and accessible treatment to this culty subject matter is because I want to highlight that even though not everyone watching the Vow or the Jody Hildebrand story or the Scientology documentary or whatever would fall for those particular cults, there is a cult in square quotes, in scare quotes, for everyone, whether it's, what ends up being a kind of emotionally abusive fitness community or wellness community or, corporate job or even just a one-on-one relationship. And it's important to be aware of the cultish techniques of abuse and language and conformity that can show up in unlikely places so that we can all engage with community and mysticism in a healthier way. But yeah, I think we're just like watching these documentaries trying to determine whether or not we would fall for the same stuff. And my argument is like, yes and no.
Yeah, I'm wondering even about you, being so deeply entrenched in this topic, do you feel like your definition of cult has changed? And do you think the world's definition of cult has changed now? Like, we're seeing it with MAGA, like, we're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, I do think that the broader, more mainstream understanding of what a cult is has morphed a bit because it is being applied to more mainstream political affiliations. I think there was a time, not too long ago when you would say the word cult and a person might think of like a fringy compound in the woods
Shaved
helmed by like,
head, yeah.
yeah, exactly, Charles Manson, just something really at the outskirts of society. And now the word cult is being used to apply to certain, really well-known political factions, whether we're talking about, followers of Maha or the Manosphere or, affiliations with certain more global political movements. And I don't know that that is always so productive, because the trickiness with the word cult is that
Hmm.
it's so fluid, and I mean I obviously use it every day in so many different contexts, and some of those contexts are a little cheekier, like, oh my god, like, I'm in the cult of specialty coffee, ha ha ha. And
Trader Joe's.
yes. And some of those contexts are, a little more real. Like, we just recorded an episode of Sounds Like a Cult on the cult of Chat GPT and trying to
Hmm.
understand how Chat GPT is having a really dangerous effect on the mental health of its users in a way that does mirror more classic, in some cases, suicide cults from history. And so that's a much more serious context. But then there are the situations when it's just used to kind of lambast people who disagree with you and to otherize them and to shut down conversations. I prefer to use the word cult to open up unexpected conversations.
Hmm.
So it's tricky. Like
That's
my
so
definition is
interesting.
really fluid. Yeah.
That's super interesting because when like just catching myself in my own bias of saying the cult of MAGA, like, are they in a cult? I don't know. It feels like it, but I could totally
Yeah.
be wrong. And is it because that's not where I stand politically? And so I guess there is like a reflective piece of, I like the distinction of like using it to open a conversation versus, well, and again, I don't feel like it is, "Well, you're an idiot because you don't believe what I believe." But it
Yeah.
does feel like a different set of ideas, like I was thinking about, I listened to an episode with you where you had mentioned trad wives being very, um, innocuous, like, and maybe it was like a year ago where you were
Did
talking
I
about
call
it
them
being,
innocuous?
no, but you said it more harmless, like, when you think of, so let me just tell my listener, those that are not familiar with you. In, Sounds Like a Cult, you have 3 categories, which I think are so funny, and I wanna get into the language of this, where
Sure.
you'll have a conversation with people, and you will determine, is this, what level of cult is it? Do you wanna, jump in?
Sure, yes. So on Sounds Like a Cult, we analyze cult-ish groups from the zeitgeist, so less like Jonestown and Heaven's Gate and Nexium, and more, like Disney adults, um, in incels, like a wide spectrum of groups, some of which, are seemingly harmless, but we're trying to determine, even though this group like seems really ritualistic and like kind of freaky, how harmful is it really? And so at the end of every episode we determine if the group is a live your life, a watch your back, or a get the fuck out level cult. And it is super cheeky, like this is obviously not like scientific taxonomy by any means, but it is, it is a fun conversation to have. It's very subjective, obviously. I'm pretty sure, okay, the Tradwife episode that we recorded like a year and a half ago, I interviewed Anne Helen Peterson, who runs Culture
Yes,
Study, which is
yes.
a newsletter and a podcast, and just like a brilliant platform and lens through which to analyze many different corners of society. And Helen Peterson's like expertise is in, feminism, pop culture, evangelicalism, all these different things. And I had the false impression when I first tuned into like trad wife discourse that it was like kind of a bit, that it was all like just a performance of, I guess, traditional femininity just for like shock value and views online. And then I came to understand that that's not the case whatsoever. Like, this is truly, a pursuit of embodying biblical womanhood and evangelizing that through social media videos on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, what have you. And I was like pretty scandalized by that. But at the same time, trad wives are not on the same level of cult as I'm trying to think of a GTFO cult that we've covered. Well, we just released an episode at the end of 2025 on Mormon therapists. Like
That
Jody
one was so
Hildebrand.
good.
Oh, thank you.
Ugh.
We interviewed John DeLynn, who runs the Mormon Stories podcast. He's an ex-Mormon and a mental health expert, and is just really brilliant at unpacking and deconstructing like Mormonism and relating it to issues of today. And anyway, I think we determined at the end of that episode that Mormon therapy was a GTFO. Whereas trad wives, like, there is a way to tune into trad wife content that won't like completely indoctrinate you. But I don't know, at this point, like with increasing conservatism and like our backwards approach to gender roles in our culture right now, maybe I would call trad wives a GTFO. I don't know. That's why this like subject
That's what
matter
I
is
was
so
thinking.
up to
It feels like it's
interpretation.
been so weaponized now
Yeah.
politically. And
Yeah.
when I think about the language piece of it, like this is the part where I love when you talk about like the language side of things. So I'm doing this new series on my show where I'll take like a really popular show, podcast, and I'll break down why it's so popular, like some of the
Oh,
features
interesting.
on it. So
Cool.
one of the ones that I did is on I've Had It podcast. Are you
Uh-huh.
familiar with it?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
like they are screaming left, and they look like very right wing. They
Yeah.
are
It's
they
true.
are
It's
very,
totally
very
true.
progressive. But
Yeah.
they have like turned up the notch on their language where I was starting to break down, like they call JD Vance, for instance, a prostitute, and it clearly and quickly establishes something that can be, really offensive to people, but also like clearly puts him in a category of he will do anything for money is the way that is put in a way. And so when I think about the language they use and the way they call, like they call Donald Trump, what do they call him? Uh McTaco tits. Something.
Okay.
It's kind of funny. It's
Got
something
it.
else, but like
So they
all the
they
language
sound
stuff.
yeah, well, it's true that they have that kind of like MAGA wife look, but they're
They
not.
have the MAGA wife look.
And so I think they're really playing with juxtaposition and
Yeah.
irony and kind of flipping the script insofar as like, some of that language that you're describing sounds like slurs that ultra right wing misogynists would wield against women online, or god forbid in person. But they're kind of like giving the right taste of their own medicine.
That's
And
why I think it works, though.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
why I think it
yeah.
works.
No, it's
They're
probably it's
using
just like
Trump's
so
playbook.
shocking. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
they're
It's kind
using
of
Trump's
like
playbook.
it reminds me of like some of the tweets that Gavin Newsom has made about Trump,
Yes,
where he's just like fighting fire with fire a little bit.
and they
And
have no idea.
yeah, well, right. And you said before, like, I'm calling MAGA a cult. Am I wrong? And I actually no, like, you're not wrong. I just think that if we were to talk to our political opponents, it probably would not and get through to them. It probably would not be so productive to call them a
No,
cult to their face, because
no.
they would just throw it right back in our face, and then it would just be
Yeah.
kind of this like, battle of insults that again would like shut down any attempt at productive discourse. But sometimes we don't want to engage in productive discourse, and we're just like, in a safe bubble being like, they're a cult. And, that's fine. And that's right. But yeah, it is a very, very tricky loaded word that I have to like use very specifically, and know that not everyone is going to understand what I'm saying sometimes, especially like on a microphone.
Hey, it's Allison. Thanks for listening. My guest today, Amanda Montell, knows that having a podcast to share your stories, insight, and ideas can make a huge impact to influence change. And if you're looking to grow your impact and influence and income, a podcast is one of the greatest ways to do it. I have only a few seats open for the podcast launch cohort. I'm starting in January. Want to know more? Go book a free call with me at allisonhair.com/free call. And let's explore yours, but do not wait. There are only a few spots and the doors are closing soon. Let's get back to the show. And I think that that is the thing. Like, I'm catching myself in my own bias of like, I really need to look at this of if there is no productive discourse. Like, when I think of the I've had it girls, women, I think like it becomes almost like a release and a relief to hear people talk this offensively and say, yes, it's almost like
It's
commitment.
cathartic.
It is
Yeah.
cathartic. That's the right word. Of course, you would have the right word. But it feels cathartic. But
Yeah.
when you're in a discourse with people, when I think about being in a cult, whether it is love bombing or grooming, and I think like Erica Kirk is being fully groomed right now. Like I don't know how anybody could have in their right mind when you have your husband blown to bits publicly, and be like, I don't know, doing all of these events. She feels like a very political pawn that is being groomed right now. And so when I think about like how do we come to, and I don't know if this is too deep. I'm just like in the political kind of sphere of how do we kind of engage in better discourse together when we see so much that's happening so fast that feels very threatening. It feels very
Yes.
scary.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, this is just my opinion. This is outside of my wheelhouse, like I'm just voicing like my observations, but I think that the political left needs to like listen a little bit better in order to understand what we're dealing with, because I mean, I'll speak for myself. When I hear people on the political right voice their views and their ideologies, which of course feel really dangerous and violent and cult like and backwards and whatever, my intuitive response is to like look away and be like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Like, I cannot engage with that. Those people are just wrong. We need to, like pursue the right path and whatever, and just like ignore them. But that I don't think is working. um, and like speaking of the Gavin Newsom thing, someone said something funny on the internet along the lines of the political left needs a psychopath, and like Gavin Newsom could be that psychopath. And like I don't whatever. Like whatever. I think Gavin Newsom's kind of creepy, but but it is true that like I believe it's true that the political left and the political right are just like in separate universes in terms of like the strategies they're using to bring their ideologies forward. And if the left is not listening to the tactics that the right is using, then we're never going to be able to do I want to say bridge the gap or fight them or whatever. Like we're not going to know what we're dealing with. And something that I've observed studying like evangelical culture and language is that like anti-abortion activists who are trained from a very, very young age to fight that particular fight are given like a script of rebuttals and thought-terminating clichés and like weird
Can
metaphors
you
and
define
things.
thought-terminating cliches?
Yes. So, thought-terminating cliche, this is a phrase that was coined in the early 1960s by a psychiatrist named Robert J. Lifton, and it's a technique that's in every cult leader's arsenal. It describes a sort of zingy stock expression that's easy to memorize, easy to repeat, and aimed at shutting down independent thinking or questioning. So, thought-terminating cliches also show up in everyday life. There are phrases like "it is what it is" or "boys will be boys." They put people's cognitive dissonance to bed. They stop people from expressing pushback so that the, person in power can remain in power a little bit longer.
Hmm.
And, they also show up in cults, like in MLMs, for example, if someone has a question or like, why did these LuLaRoe leggings like show up moldy and like falling apart? Their upline might say something like, oh, that's just a victim mindset. A good system always
Yeah.
works, that kind of thing. So, you know, like far right evangelicals are oftentimes trained from a young age to meet pushback or dissent or arguments with thought terminating cliches and metaphors. And if we don't listen to those and try to understand where they're coming from, we're never going to be able to argue back. We're just going to be hit with this, like, what the fuck are you talking about? And it's going to make us flustered and frustrated. And then we're just going to like throw back some slur like, well, you're just like a fucking, I don't know, like you're just like a fucking Jesus freak or whatever, like say something like that. And that's not helpful and that's not productive. And so, yeah, I think we need to do some like listening and understanding just to see who we're dealing with here.
I do feel like we are in a position where we are looking for Jesus. We are looking for like the
In some
false
form.
prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and I when your book came out, and I'm gonna sound like a total nerd, like I had a Google Doc where I would just take notes of things that you said, and it
Oh
just
my God.
hit me like,
I'm your
well,
cult
when you
leader.
think
I'm
of
just kidding.
I
I'm joking.
welcome, you're your own cult leader. But I think about like the halo effect. Can you explain the halo effect? Because there's one thing you said that really stood out, which was pop stars become our new priests. Can you talk about
Yes.
that halo effect?
Totally. So, this is in reference to a chapter in my third book, The Age of Magical Overthinking, which is almost like a spin-off of my second book, Cultish, because like I was just so curious as to how certain psychological shortcuts that I was coming across in the literature I was reading for Cultish show up outside of cults, just in like everyday decisions in the culture and in my own life. Like, why do fans seem to lift celebrities up on these crazy pedestals and then dethrone them with such violence? What are those cycles? What's responsible for those? And so the opening chapter of The Age of Magical Overthinking surrounds this phenomenon. Sorry, I'm like talking so fast and drawing up air in my lungs. Okay. Surrounds this phenomenon called the halo effect, which is a cognitive bias defined by our propensity to make positive assumptions about a person's overall character based on our admiration of one single trait. So, in the case of a parasocial role model like a pop star, we like their lyrics. So, we jump to the conclusion that that person is perfect overall, that they're nurturing, that they're educated, that they align politically with us, that they care about us as much as we care about them. And then whenever they do something to defy the expectations that we've built up in our head based on the halo effect, we feel betrayed and feel the need to dethrone them. And the halo effect is, based on millennia of techniques that we used to use to find role models. You can imagine earlier humans living in smaller communities who would identify a role model by, say, clocking someone in their tribe who had big muscles and intact teeth. And they would, jump to the conclusion that that person had been a strong warrior and a strong hunter, and that they would be good to align with for survival purposes. We're now mapping those instincts onto these more parasocial, abstract role models, and that sometimes leads to pretty intense irrationalities. And we're not only doing that to pop stars, who I think oftentimes are our new sort of like spiritual figures. Sometimes we do it to politicians, and sometimes, the line between a politician and a business leader and a celebrity gets really, 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 really blurry. And we end up elevating people who should not be deified to really high positions.
I have been thinking about the heated rivalry guys who are so fucking hot.
I
But at
know.
the same time,
Obsessed. I'm
I'm
so
watching
obsessed.
them like it has been only 90 days and they are put on such a high pedestal
I
where I'm looking at
know.
the comments and I'm like,
No, I
these poor
worry.
guys.
I know. I
I'm
worry.
worried.
I actually am worried because I'm going to be so curious. I actually think they are slightly more protected just because they're men. Like we tend
Hmm.
to have like a much slimmer margin of error for women,
Tell me
obviously.
about the
Like,
gender differences like that you
yeah,
see in this.
yeah. Well, I mean, the more marginalized a person is, the higher our expectations are going to be for them to behave perfectly. And so, these men are marginalized because they're gay, but they're like hot cis dudes. And so
Yeah,
I
they're
think
street
they're just
presenting. Yeah.
yeah, I mean they're just hot, like they're
Yeah,
just
they're
hot.
hot.
And so and they're men. And so I think they're just going to be able to get away with a little more because no one's perfect, and eventually, I can imagine them like saying something that's a little like off politically or something like that. Like they're hot in the show, they're talented performers. I think a lot of their fans are deifying them. And I am too, in like a joking way, because it's like this, people are saying like heated rivalry is bringing us together. Like who would expect like this gay hockey show is like healing America? And like there's some irony there, but I think a lot of people are taking it really seriously, and eventually like I could see one of these two guys, just because they are human and they're just actors who got this like really quick success, eventually they are going to say something that rubs people the wrong way, and I just hope
Mm.
that people have some grace for that, because I just remember like Chapel Roan was elevated so quickly, and then she
Mm.
started saying like, a lot of like bullshitty stuff like that rubbed her fans the wrong way. But it's like, why did you expect that she was gonna have cogent opinions? Like
Yeah.
she's just like she's just a pop star, like, and it's interesting. I mean, I go into like in that chapter on the halo effect in the age of magical overthinking, I kind of go into the history of our expectations of pop stars in terms of like their political stances and things. And I also did an episode of my Magical Overthinkers podcast about celebrity worship with Jessica Gross, who is a fantastic New York Times reporter. And we talked about how like, there was certainly a time during like Beatlemania and stuff. It was the 60s, and then later the 70s, where like we were looking to people like John Lennon as a political role model, like music is so political, but we weren't necessarily like expecting every rock star or pop star to have a coherent political opinion. We weren't like waiting for them to voice their stances, and now I think we kind of are, and when they're
Yeah.
not so good at that, we punish them. But I do think that Connor Story and Hudson Williams are I really do think that they're gonna they're gonna do better just in terms of like their relationship with their fans than a woman, just because they're men.
That is so wild. So, Amanda, tell me, how did you get into cults to begin with?
Oh,
Why a cult?
well, yeah, great question. Well, my dad grew up in a cult. My dad was raised throughout his teenage years against his will in the cult Synanon, which was this kind of 60s and 70s, mostly 70s era alternative drug rehabilitation experiment that turned into this socialist utopian compound that ended up being very exploitative and violent. And yeah, my dad spent his many of his formative years there. And I grew up on my dad's stories of, the shaved heads and the dismal barracks where he slept and the crash diets that everyone was forced to go on. And, it was madness. But he showed up there when he was 14, and he looked around and he was like, I know something is wrong here. And so he escaped
Wow.
as quickly as he could. But I grew up on his stories, and as I, came of age, I couldn't help but notice that the same, techniques of influence that my dad would describe in Synanon could be found kind of everywhere, like even in my high school theater program, and in the ways that people would talk about their yoga studios and stuff. And that was kind of the foundation for my work on the language of cults.
So I'm curious about one specific thing that you talked about in the age of magical overthinking is sunk cost fallacy. And the reason why is because the people that listen to my show, the listener, are usually in a place of reinvention, meaning they have outgrown the containers of where they were. And so when you think about like, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer at 18 and now I'm in my 40s and I'm like, this fucking sucks and I need to start over. I'd be curious to get your perspective on the sunk cost fallacy because I think this bias is really important as we move on to our next evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. So this was one of the biases that I came across while researching cultish. And it's defined by our fallacious tendency to think that resources already spent on an endeavor, whether it's time, money, but also emotional resources like hope or
Mm.
secrets, justify spending even more. So it's like, oh my God, I've already, spent 20 years at this job. Like, surely the, promises that were made to me or the, payoff that I was expecting is just around the corner. Sunk cost fallacy is obviously like a major factor in what keeps people in abusive cults. But as I was reading, some of the psychology and behavioral economics literature on it, I couldn't help but notice that it could also explain so many other phenomena that we might not think of as culty, including, in my case, my relationship in my early 20s to stay for many years in a relationship that really, really wasn't serving me, and that in many ways felt like a cult of one. And to bring it back to my irrational thought spiral from the very beginning of this conversation, like that was the relationship that I think set me up for some of my weird habits later on in relationships. But anyway, yeah, the sunk cost fallacy is, I think, something that keeps so many people aligned with political ideas that they have since
Mm.
decided they maybe deep down disagree with, or to stay in jobs that are they're realizing like what they thought at the beginning was going to become true is not actually true for them in the end. And it shows up in relationships. It shows up in, even, we've been watching a TV show for 5 seasons and we're no longer into it anymore. But we're like, oh, I'm already invested in all these characters. Like I have to watch to the end. It's, yeah, it's such an interesting irrationality that I think is holding us back from living our most authentic lives and making decisions that really honor our values.
I love it. I love it. I think it's important to also shine a light on it is normal. It is normal to feel that way.
Yeah.
And like
Yes.
the lens that we see the world of like what I love because I think there were 11, were there 11 in Age of Magical Overthinking of like 11 different cognitive biases or
Yeah.
biases. What about that?
Yeah, there are 11 chapters, and each one kind of centers on how a different cognitive bias can explain some mysterious irrationality from the zeitgeist or my own life.
I felt like it was a really great a way to categorize some of the things that we deal with, and almost cathartic, like have permission to put
Thanks.
it together in a different way. I know we only have a few minutes left. Can we do a quick lightning round?
But yes, I'll do my best.
What is a cult you want to try?
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh, great question. I my husband would really appreciate if I could get into video games on any level. And one of my best friends
Oh,
is really into The Sims. And we do have an upcoming episode of Sounds Like a Cult on The Sims. And so I'm
that is so
interested to
funny.
dabble in the cult of The Sims.
You answered that so good. Well, I don't know that I would have been able to quickly do it. What is the word or phrase that makes you suspicious the second you hear it?
Oh, when someone when someone describes a person as either being high or low vibration, that gives like
Oh.
new age conspiracy theory dog whistle.
What is a trend on the horizon in the zeitgeist that we need to know about? What do you see coming?
Oh my god. I've been trying to like back away from the zeitgeist as opposed to make any predictions of it. What is a trend that we need to be aware of? Ugh, I'm just I don't know. I'm so sad about like the beauty standards that are being set for
Hmm.
young people. And I
Like
think
the Sephora kids.
Sephora kids and just like skinny talk and things like that. And I think we need to be more sensitive and aware of how our like adult approaches to our appearances are affecting young people.
I have so much more to say about that, but I know we're out of time.
I
I think
know.
it's something even, for me at my age that I still struggle, like I
Yeah.
won't leave my house without a full face of makeup, and I don't like to see myself age. And so it's interesting how early that starts, but like
Yeah.
even with all this stuff, so I agree with you there. Last one, finish this sentence. I know something is gone culty when.
Well, I know something has gone culty when I struggled to have a conversation with someone without them using buzzwords.
Oh, what are some buzzwords?
I mean, they depend on the specific community, but, I am in the cult of Legree Pilates. I just came from
Uh-huh.
a Legree Pilates class, and,
I love it. I love it.
some
It's
of
my
the
favorite. Yeah.
really?
It's
Um,
so great.
and if someone is, like, very earnestly talking about their Pilates routine and I mean, okay, I cannot imagine someone actually using this terminology in real life, but, like, you know how some of the Pilates moves are called, like double reverse dancing bear or, like
Yeah, or
like,
like
twisted
scrambled egg
scrambled
or
egg?
something. Yeah.
And I'm just like, "Come on, like, that is so unhelpful in describing this move." Like, it really does feel like they're trying to divide people and, like, an us and a them, and it's, like, the people who know and the people who don't. I'm just like, "This is so
You're
culty."
probably so hypersensitive to it,
I
as
am.
well, like, where you just hear anything, and I, like, consume this so much where I'm always on the lookout for it, and sometimes you're like, "Fuck it." Like, I'm
No,
into it.
totally. Oh my gosh, 100%, and that's why, like, even as silly as the live your life, watch with your back, get the fuck out classification system is, I do, like, kinda use it in my own
I
head.
love it. Yeah, I think it's smart. Well, Amanda, how can people find you, read your book, get your paperback book, all of it?
Yeah. Well, I am reluctantly on Instagram at Amanda_Montell. You can find my books, Word Slut, Cultish, and The Age of Magical Overthinking out now in paperback wherever you buy books. And my podcasts, Magical Overthinkers and Sounds Like a Cult, are available on all major podcast platforms.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. I will put
Yeah.
everything in the show notes and am so honored to be able to talk to you. I think you are one of the smartest and most intelligent,
That's
funniest people. You make me feel smart the way you
oh,
talk about
oh
some of
my
this
god, that's
stuff.
so nice.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
grateful to have you and introduce you to my audience as well. So please go connect with Amanda. Reluctantly send her a DM, tell her I sent you.
Yes. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're a culture changer, Amanda. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I love talking to Amanda Montell. You are now going to see things from a new lens, and you're going to see it everywhere. The cultiness is all around. And not only that, I highly recommend checking out her work. Her particular style is so irresistible, and her books and podcasts have me so hooked that I can't even get out of the car when I'm listening. Her books, Word Slut, Cultish, and The Age of Magical Overthinking, along with her podcast, Sounds Like a Cult and Magical Overthinkers, are in the show notes. Shoot her a DM, tell her I sent you, tell her you heard it here. And as for you, if you're looking to use your words and language to make a big difference in the world, I only have a few spots left for my upcoming podcast launch cohort that begins the week of January 26th. Your podcast will be live and brilliant by March, if not sooner. If this is speaking to you, let's make sure we are the right fit. But do not wait. Book a free call with me at AllisonHair.com/free call. And if you're wondering what to do with all these ideas and what you heard today, share it in a podcast, in your circles, in your socials. But whatever you do, do not sit on the sidelines. This is how culture changes.